Have you ever been in a scenario where everything seemed like it was going wrong, but it all turned out right? Hey everybody, welcome to The Whole Truth, where I am taking you through the entire Bible from Genesis all the way to Revelation, and we are not skipping anything. If that sounds good to you, reach down and hit the little subscribe button below, and then you can like and comment and share on the video, and that helps it go far and wide. If you would like to support the channel, you can do that over at Patreon, and I'm providing at Patreon all of the study notes that I'm using for these videos. I've been doing that since the book of Joshua. So Joshua all the way through Judges, I have all of the notes for each video that we've made, and those are available over on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/thewholetruth. Okay, now enough with all of the introductory stuff, because today is an exciting day. We begin the book of Ruth. This is a new series. We've gone all the way through Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, and now we just finished Judges a couple of days ago, and we're jumping into the book of Ruth. You see how that goes? We're going all the way through the Bible. And so in Ruth Chapter 1, we're introduced to a few characters, and namely those characters in the beginning, in this opening chapter, are all experiencing tragedy. And it's a rough time in the world. We just watched this. If you've been following along with this series, then you finished the book of Judges, and those last 5 chapters in the book of Judges are rough. I mean, Judges in itself is rough, but goodness, the lay of the land is, and I obviously mean figuratively, it's rough. It's hard. I mean, you end up with a graphic rape scene at the end of the book of Judges. It is almost hard to read at times. Now, we come into the book of Ruth and watch how we open this book, or watch how the Lord opens this book. So the most important thing you need to do for today, grab your Bible. Open your Bible to Ruth chapter 1 and read along with me. We'll begin with the first 5 verses. All right, here we go. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to dwell in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech. The name of his wife was Naomi. And the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to the country of Moab and remained there. And then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left and her 2 sons. And now they took wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelt there about 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Chilion died. So the women survived their 2 sons and her husband. And then she arose with her daughters-in-law, that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people by giving them bread. Okay, I read one too many verses, but I'm not starting this video over because I read one too many verses. I'll just read that one again here in a moment. In the first 5 verses, let's focus there. We're introduced to some characters. Now, those characters are Elimelech and his wife, Naomi. Notice that it is during the time of the judges. So it's an ugly time in the world. It's not a nice time. It's not a peaceful time, not for Israel. It's a time of war. It's a time of battle. It's a time when the people of Israel have been worshiping false gods and following after other gods. And so there's idol worship. There's all kinds of wickedness that's happening inside of that. And so God is technically being faithful to his own word. He warned Israel that this would happen. If they were following after false gods, he was going to do something. Do you remember what it was? He told it to us in Deuteronomy. He told it to us in the book of Leviticus and in Numbers. Do you remember what he said? That if the people worshiped idols, that if they went after other gods, if they didn't obey his commandments, then God would send famine on the land and drought on the land. And that's what's happening. The people are intermixed with idol worship and evil doing, and God has sent famine on the land. And so in the middle of that famine, in the middle of that time of the judges, Elimelech is starving. He has a wife. He has 2 young children, and he doesn't know what to do. So he gets up and he leaves. He leaves from Bethlehem and he goes to Moab. Now, there's a problem inside of going to Moab, which is that they're not supposed to do that. Israelite people were not supposed to mingle with the Moabites. They weren't supposed to go over to Moab because of some stuff that Moab had done earlier. And we've read that earlier in the Bible, but I'm not going to get into that right now because it's not the point or kind of the thrust that I want to get at, other than the fact that you're just going to have to accept from me right now, you're going to have to accept the fact that Israelite people were not supposed to mingle with Moabite people. They weren't supposed to intermarry. They weren't supposed to go to that land. So this is a big deal for Elimelech to do this. But of course he would do it because he's starving. His family is starving. So he's going to do what he has to do. And he's taking his family, his wife and his 2 sons, and off to Moab they go. Well, Elimelech died while they were in Moab, leaving this widowed young mother, Naomi, with her 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Now, in the death of her husband, there's already the tragedy and the sadness and the hardship. And I'm going to tell you guys, I used to have a different view of Naomi. I used to see this story, and I'd get to the end part where Naomi talks about being bitter, which we'll get to here in a moment. And I used to think to myself that, well, you shouldn't have gone to Moab. You were doing what you weren't supposed to be doing. But goodness, as now I've gotten older and I have children of my own, and then my wife passed away, and I understand the grieving and the heartache that comes with losing a spouse, I see Naomi in a totally different light. And my heart just breaks for this woman as they're in the middle of a famine. They're in the middle of a terrible time in Israel. Her husband Elimelech takes the family and goes to Moab. She probably didn't have a ton of choice in that. I don't think anything bad about Elimelech. I don't think he was a bad husband. I just think that he probably made the decision to get up and go to Moab. And even if she had agreed in that decision, it still, can you imagine you're in the middle of a famine? You get up in the middle of the famine, you go to Moab, and your husband dies. But there was a glimmer of hope that was still in her life. She has these 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Certainly life was probably hard as she's raising these children in a hard time in the world, and she's in a strange country trying to raise up these 2 boys, Mahlon and Chilion. And it seems like this glimmer of hope. She found wives for her sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Their names are Ruth and Orpah. So now you have Naomi, whose husband Elimelech passed, her 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion, and their 2 wives, Orpah and Ruth. Now stick with me. Mahlon and Chilion died. So now you have 3 widowed women, 2 young women, Ruth and Orpah, and an older woman, Naomi. All of them have lost their husbands in a time in the world when being a single female was not a safe place to be. It's tragedy on top of tragedy. And you can imagine that the view that Naomi has right now is that everything is going wrong. Nothing is going right. Nothing is happening the way that it's supposed to be happening. There was this one time I was out with my brother, and we were on this pickup. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and we were doing our last pickup for the day, and we went into this woman's home, and there was her sofa in this back sunroom. We picked the sofa up, and we tried to get the sofa out. There were 3 exits, one out the side door, one through the dining room, and one through the kitchen. Those are the way out, the way out of the room. And so we tried to go out the closest door, but there was no way. It wasn't going to fit. And so we picked up the sofa, and we were trying to go through. I used to reupholster furniture, if you didn't know that. And so we tried to go the other way. We tried to go through the dining room. Nope, no way. It's not going to fit. My brother grabbed a tape measure, and we measured the sofa, and we measured the doorway, and there was 1 inch of clearance to go through that doorway of the kitchen. But the problem was there was a handle on the refrigerator that was in the way. And the older lady said, "You can move that refrigerator. I move it all the time to clean behind it." And we said, no, we can't move your refrigerator. We're not insured for that, whatever. She insisted. She said, if you don't move it, then you're going to make this old widowed woman move that refrigerator. Well, we're not going to let that happen. So we said, look, we're not liable for whatever happens, but we'll do it. So we grabbed the refrigerator and pulled the refrigerator and water. We heard water spraying. I looked at my brother and he looked at me and I said, it's the water line. It's the water line. And so I dove behind the refrigerator and I put my hand over top of the water and it's spraying all over me. I'm trying to keep it from spraying all over the cabinets. I mean, it looked like a movie scene. It's little. It's like a little pipe, but it's a copper water line that had busted and it's moving. It's like spraying back and forth. So I put my hand over it and I said, get the shut off, get the shut off. I promise you, my brother dove under the cabinet, tried to twist the handle and he pulls out. He goes, it broke. The shutoff valve broke. I said, go in the basement, get the main. So my brother runs downstairs and he finds the main. It felt like forever as I'm standing there or sitting there with holding this water, trying to keep it capped from spraying. I'm getting soaked. There's water pulled up on the floor. My brother and this old woman finally come up from the basement and the water had stopped. I'm sitting in a puddle of water. Everything is soaked around me. I'm soaked. And the old woman throws her hand out and she goes, John, why'd you leave me? I will never forget that day. It just seemed like everything that could go wrong. We were just trying to finish up our day, and it seemed like everything that could go wrong had gone wrong. Now, obviously, that's a fun, silly little story in comparison to what we're talking about with Ruth and Naomi and Orpah. These three women have all three lost their husbands, and from their perspective, everything has gone wrong. But here's the thing that I want you to catch on to. Naomi's perspective is that everything has gone wrong. But truthfully, what is happening is God is setting the stage to demonstrate his redemptive plan again. This whole story is a typology of Christ. You see, from Naomi's perspective, her husband has died, her children have died, and so she sees this as tragedy upon tragedy upon tragedy, and rightfully so. I can understand where her mind is in that. I really can understand that. My wife has passed, left me with 6 children. 5 of them I was still homeschooling at home. I mean, it was a rough time in my life when my wife passed away. I get that feeling. But from a future perspective, being able to look backward and see, what we see is this, that Ruth, the whole book that we're reading is Ruth. Ruth became her daughter-in-law. And it is because of Ruth, as we get through the rest of the story, as Naomi is forced to go back home. And then we see the picture of this kinsman redeemer in this man named Boaz. And we'll be introduced to him in a little bit. But the point for a moment is this, that even in what seems like the hardest of tragedies, God can still work. And he does work. He is working. Listen, if you're here right now and you're watching this video and you're going through it, maybe you've lost a spouse, maybe you've lost a child, maybe you've lost a home or a job, maybe you've gone through a gnarly, nasty divorce, maybe something in your life has gone, everything seems like it's gone wrong and nothing's where it's supposed to be. Will you just hear this? I know I'm not cheapening. Please trust this once widower pastor. I am not cheapening what you're going through. I'm trying to encourage you with God can work in the middle of that tragedy. He did for Naomi, and he can for you. Let's read the rest of the story. It's now in Ruth chapter 1 and in verse 6. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people by giving them bread. Therefore she went out from the place where she was, and her 2 daughters-in-law with her. And they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her daughters-in-law, go, return each one to her mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest each in the house of her husband. And so she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And she said, and they said to her, surely we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there still sons in my womb that they may be your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should say I have a husband tonight and should also bear sons, would you wait for them until they were grown? Would you restrain yourselves from having husbands? No, my daughters, for it grieves me very much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Okay, so here we see the picture of these three widowed women, Naomi and Ruth and Orpah. Naomi hears that there's bread, that God had visited his people, and there's bread in Judah. And so she packs up. Her husband died more than 10 years ago. She's got two widowed daughters-in-law that live with her, and she's done. She's done with this Moab thing. She's done with this move. She's heard that there's food again. The famine is over. Remember, this whole move, this whole thing started with a famine. She's heard that the Lord had visited his people. Now, I just got to make this point to you. I love this so much because of a couple of things. Number one, there is a grand typology that is happening in this story. And one of them is this right here. It's that Naomi is from, before she went to Moab, she is from Bethlehem. So when she's going back to Judah, where is she going? Bethlehem. Why is she going to Bethlehem? Because she heard that God had visited his people, and because she heard that there was bread in Bethlehem. Now, there are several things happening here. Number one, catch this. Where was Jesus born? Remember, the wise men went to Jerusalem looking for him because they'd seen his star, and they were told he's not here. We've heard that he would be born in Bethlehem. I did this series for Christmas this past year. I did Ruth as the series at church, and we looked at the typology of Christ through the book of Ruth. And so check this out. It's Bethlehem. That's where she's going. Why is she going to Bethlehem? Because God had visited the people. When Jesus came to this earth, he is God who came to visit his people. And not only that, but Bethlehem. Do you know what Bethlehem means? House of bread. Bethlehem is the house of bread. Naomi was going back to Bethlehem because she heard that God had visited his people and there was bread in Bethlehem. And do you remember that Jesus said, I am the bread of life? Listen, the typologies are all over this. And I want you to hear this. God visited his people. If there's one reason that I could give you to come to the Lord, to turn to him, maybe you're in the middle of tragedy. Maybe for you, it's that tragedy that is putting you in a position to finally look at the Lord. Maybe it's depression or anxiety or whatever thing you might be going through is causing you to look to the Lord. Well, here's what I want you to know. He visited his people. He came for his own. Jesus is the Son of God who came to this earth so that he could redeem you and I. I hope that that's the message, like Naomi. I hope that that's the message that you hear and that you catch. Naomi has heard this, and so Naomi is drawn to go to Bethlehem, the house of bread, because she's heard that God had visited the people and brought them bread. So here goes Naomi, and Ruth and Orpah want to go with her, but Naomi turns to them. She says, why would you go with me? Now, this part doesn't make a lot of sense to us because this is a cultural thing that we don't understand. She says, do I still have sons in my womb? What would that matter? Like, she's saying she's not of childbearing age. But you have to understand, in those days, this was the custom. If a husband died and left a woman as a widow, the custom of the day, especially in Israel, the way to take care of that widow is that the widow would marry the brother of the deceased. So widowed women would marry the brother of their husbands if their husband passed. It was a means of them being provided for and taken care of and having provision. It was the law of the land. It was the custom of the day. Now, we don't understand that. To us, like, that is grotesque even at times. We don't like that idea. And I'm fine with the fact that we don't like that idea. But in that day, in that time, That's what Naomi is referencing. Naomi is saying, hey, do I even have sons in my womb? And even if I did, even if by some miracle I'm like Sarah and Abraham and I get remarried and I have even this very night get remarried tonight and I get pregnant tonight and I have twin boys, are you two, Ruth and Orpah, are you going to wait to marry them? Remember that Naomi has some experience here. Naomi is a veteran widow. She's been widowed for at least 10 years. So Naomi knows some experience. She knows the loneliness and the things that have happened. And she was older than Ruth and Orpah, apparently. She's like, you all are young and you're beautiful. You go back to your homes, go back to your mom and dad, go back to your people, and you'll be able to find a husband. You're going to find husbands. You're going to be able to go on with your lives. I know it doesn't seem like it right now, but you got a whole life ahead of you. You're young widows. You got a whole life. She's like, for me, there's nothing for me. I'm going back where there's food. You all turn back. But I can't, even if you came with me, what am I going to do? I can't provide husbands for you. There's nothing there. Both, see, the way it should have been is like Mahlon would have died, but then Ruth could have gone with Chilion. But that's not the way it can go because both sons had died. That's what Naomi is referencing. So they all lift up their voices and they cry. And Orpah, I don't fault her for this. I don't think she was trying to do wrong. She was just trying to do what she knew was best. Orpah turned back and she left. She packed up her things and she went home to her mom and dad. We don't know what happened with Orpah. But Ruth, listen to this. Pick it up with me now in verse 14. And then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. She said, look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, entreat me not to leave you or turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. And your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. And where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. And the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. And when she saw that she was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her. I'm going to pause there for a moment. I know my study notes don't have a break here, but I want to pause there for a moment because this is one of the most wonderful examples of someone giving their life to the Lord. And it came through tragedy and it came through stubbornness and hard-headedness. Ruth is clinging to Naomi. Naomi's going to go back to Bethlehem. Ruth is determined to go with her. Orpah turned back. The one sister-in-law turned back. So now, out of all these names that we've been given, we're down to two characters, Naomi and Ruth. Naomi is going to go back to Bethlehem, and Ruth says she's going to go with her. Naomi tries one more time and says, turn back. Go back to your sister-in-law. Now, again, I used to see that differently. I used to see this as Naomi was like being bitter because in a moment she'll even say that. She'll say, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, but we'll get there in a moment. I used to see this in a different light, but I see this totally differently now. I see Naomi as trying to be kind, and she's putting her daughter-in-law before herself, and she says, Ruth, there's nothing for you. Look, Orpah turned back. Go back with your sister-in-law. Go back with Orpah. Go back to your people. And Ruth makes this proclamation. She says, no way. I want your people to be my people. And here's the crazy thing that she says. I want your God to be my God. Ruth is willing to leave everything. Remember, Ruth is from Moab. This is hometown for her. This is stomping ground for her. This is what Ruth knows. But Ruth says, I want your people to be my people. And I want your God to be my God. You know, it's amazing to think that Ruth would say such a thing because Ruth could have said, well, goodness, your God has been very harsh with you. Nothing seems to have gone right with you. Why would I want your God to be my God? But Ruth sees Naomi and she wants to be with her. And she says, I want your God to be my God. Listen, I know that this can be hard to see right now, but whatever it is that's happening in your life, did you know that not only can God use it, but he can use it to draw others to himself? You know, one of the things that happened to me after my wife passed away was that I began to think that no one would want to ask me to pray for their healing. You know, here I am a pastor. I completely believe in healing. I don't believe that the gifts have ceased. I'm not a cessationalist. I believe that the gifts of the Spirit are still active. And I believe that we can pray for healing and that we should. I believe that we, the elders of the church, should lay hands on people and anoint them with oil and pray for them. And I believe that the effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. I totally believe that. But did you know that after my wife passed away, I began to have these feelings like who would want to ask me to pray for their healing? Who would want me to anoint them with oil? Who would want me to do that? I prayed for my wife and she didn't make it. Would you like to hear something? In the past 4 years since my wife has passed away, almost 4 years since my wife has passed away, I have prayed for more people, laid hands on more people, and seen more healing in my ministry than I ever saw in 13 years. Well, I shouldn't say 13, 11 years of ministry of lead pastor before that, and 7 years of being a youth pastor. Put all that ministry together, and did you know that I've seen more prayer and anointing with oil and healing in the last 4 years than I saw in all those other years combined? Did you know not only can God use your tragedy, but he can not only can he work it for good and restore you, but he can lead others to himself with what's happened in your life. Ruth is determined to go. It says that Naomi stopped speaking to her, and I've heard pastors say, I used to say that Naomi, pouted, that she kind of stomped her foot and she gave Ruth the silent treatment. I hear the joke and I hear it, but I'm going to tell you that's not the view that I have anymore. I think that I see that Naomi had a soft heart for her daughters-in-law. She knew what they were going through. They had gone through like tragedy together. And she's seen Ruth's not going to turn back. Ruth is determined to go with me. So when it says that she stopped speaking, I don't believe it was like a pouting stop speaking. I think Naomi stopped speaking in the sense of she stopped trying to convince her. And so here they are making their trek back to Bethlehem, and let's look what happens. Finish up the story with me. Pick up in verse 19. Now when she saw that she was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her. Now verse 19. Now the two of them went until they came to Bethlehem. And it happened when they had come to Bethlehem that all the city was excited because of them. And the women said, Is this Naomi? But she said to them, Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara. For the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord has brought me home empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me? And so Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. And now they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of barley harvest. And so Naomi makes it back to Bethlehem, and everybody says, It's Naomi. Like you can see there's like this reunion kind of moment. Naomi is back. Naomi is back. It's been 10 years, maybe a dozen years. Naomi is back after more than a decade of being gone. And you can see as everybody's probably wanting to share stuff with her. And Naomi she's not in a good space. She's not in a good headspace. She says, Don't call me Naomi. Why do you call me Naomi? Call me Mara. It literally means bitter. Now, why did she want to be called bitter? Because she wanted to be a bitter old woman? No. She says, call me bitter because the Lord has dealt bitterly with me. The Lord has dealt harshly with me. She says, I went out full and I came back empty. Now, that's not exactly true. She didn't really go out full. Do you remember why they left? Because there was a famine. So she didn't really go out full and come back empty. But I think she means something in a different way. She's not talking about food, is she? She's talking about when she left, she had a husband and she had sons. That's what she means when she says, I went out full and I came back empty. And so there's a point I'd like to get to right as we close this video, which is this. Part of our faith and part of our journey of faith includes lament. You know what we don't see in this is that God moves on and finds somebody else because Naomi said some bitter things about the Lord. She said some things. She had a view that the Lord had dealt bitterly with her. What we don't see is that God is in some way angry with or even corrects Naomi for saying that God had done these things to her, that the Almighty had dealt bitterly with her. God never corrected Naomi in that. What I would say is this, that our journey of faith includes times of tragedy. Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble, but be of good cheer because I have overcome the world. You see, it goes more like this. I'm going to, every person in the world is going to experience tragedy. Every person in the world is going to go through something that is hard. Your hard thing is different than my hard thing. At this point in my life, I've lived through gossip and backbiting. I've lived through poverty. I've lived through being a widower. I've lived through being a single parent. I've gone through some things, and they've been hard things. I've gone through some things, and they've been some good things. I've gone through life. My life journey is different than yours. I'm certain that it's different than yours. I'm certain that you've got things. Something that I've never had to experience is health problems. I've always been healthy. I've always had my body's been healthy. Now, I've witnessed as my wife's body wasn't healthy, but I haven't gone through that. I've not gone through anything that had needed medical attention. The Lord has blessed me with good health in that way, and I'm appreciative of the good health that the Lord has given me. So, maybe for you, you've gone through something different. Would you just hear this? Part of your faith journey includes those hardships. It's what the Lord uses to build us and strengthen us. It's what he uses to renew us. I can't blame God for the hardships that have happened in my life when it's God who's used those hardships to draw me closer and in a stronger relationship with him. Do you see what I'm saying there? In this world, you will have trouble. Let's flip that around. Let me try to say this a different way. Even if you reject God, maybe you see this video and you're like, no way, what? Maybe you're doing the thing that you would expect from Ruth, right? Like, no way, why would I follow your God? I mean, if he's going to let all these bad things happen, why would a good God let bad things happen? Why didn't he just stop it? If he doesn't stop it, then isn't he responsible for doing it? Maybe that's your attitude right now. Like, why isn't God stopping this thing in my life? No, I don't accept this. Okay, so stick with me. This question happened to me a lot. So you lost your wife, and then, people are like, well, what do you say about that? Like, what do you say about God in that? I mean, I have some hate mail even from last night of somebody referencing my deceased wife. Like how do you reconcile that? Okay, stick with me for a moment. You ready? Imagine with me, I'd lost my wife, and now I've run away from God and I run away from the church. Does my wife come back? Do you see what I'm saying? If you've lost somebody, maybe you've lost a relationship, you've gone through a terrible divorce. If you've run away from God because you've gone through a terrible divorce and your marriage didn't go the way that you thought it was going to go and everything fell apart, is your marriage coming back? Let me ask it this way. What if you didn't know anything about God and you weren't saved? Do all non-saved people, let's say you don't even believe in salvation. Let's say non-believers, people, atheists. Do atheists not experience the pain of death? If people die, are they not sad about it? Do they not have people in their life that pass away? Do atheists not experience divorce? Do atheists not have to go through financial hardships? Oh, wait a second. Do you see what I mean? In this world, you will have trouble. There's two ways that you can see this. One is that in this world, you will have trouble, but be of good cheer, for I've overcome the world. Or the other way to see it is, in this world, you will have trouble, and there's no hope anywhere for anybody. You see, I say that in the world that there is trouble, I would rather be in the boat with Jesus. Listen, the storms are going to rage, and you're going to be in a boat in the middle of that storm. You can be in the boat with Jesus, or you can be in a boat that doesn't have Jesus. That choice is yours. I hope that today you'll make the choice to be like Ruth and to say, I want your God to be my God, that you'll choose to follow the Lord and trust that he has a good plan for our lives, that he can take all of this evil in the world, all of the hardships and all of the pain, and he can work it together for good and for his own glory. Well, I hope you've enjoyed Ruth chapter 1, and I hope that you'll come back tomorrow for Ruth chapter 2. See you then.